Hey guys, sorry. You guys got to 41 wins, but not into the play-in. What gets this team to become a play-in or really a playoff team?
I mean, winning 5 of the games that we tricked off. I think Ime's talked about it. We feel like we had some games in hand this year that we wish we had back, and if we had those, we're probably there. Hopefully we take another step next year, and all our young players get better, and some of those games that were at the margin become, that were really close and end up being coin flips, and maybe we lost some coin flips this year. Some of those they're not, and we hold on to leads or whatever, and just, that alone hopefully would get us better if we don't regress in other areas.
I would say consistency is something I preached all year, and that's a big part of it. And then, kind of circle back to the road record, and understand if we took care of business on the road to the extent that we did at home, we'd obviously be in a different position. And so those 2 areas will be areas of focus going forward.
Just from a GM standpoint, though, is there anything in terms of roster construction, player acquisition that you've go into the offseason saying you need to go get to make that happen?
We were a competitive team this year, so I don't know if there's like we need to go get. I'm also not sure that we're at a stage for our team that we're thinking we need to go get. I do think it's very important that all of our players, not just our young players, but that all of our players get better individually. Like that's probably our primary focus. It's not to say that I'm not going to be aggressive this offseason looking at things that potentially make our roster better. I absolutely do that. It's probably the most core part of my job. But we're definitely not feeling the pressure of we need X. I think we feel good that we have a well-rounded roster with lots of talented players, and it's a lot of it is on our current players to add to their skill set to get a little bit better. They're very young. It's the expectation.
And then you add Tari to the mix and Steven Adams to the mix, and another year, off season under our belt to kind of hit the ground running. I think, look at all those things, and should be quite a bit of improvement just with that.
Hey, Coach, you said in your introductory press conference that your coaching style was upfront, honest, and blunt to an extent. I think the players respect that honesty and straightforwardness. How long did it take for the players to adjust to that, especially the ones that were, before you got here, were considered the rising stars, and at some point you had to bench some of them? How did they take that, and when did they adjust to that?
I think it was pretty immediate. We spent a good amount of time in the off season together, and so that was never a secret. They understood that coming in, but it wasn't like I was just coaching them for the first time once we started in preseason. They understand who I am, and we've had a ton of conversations leading into the season. So, that's the coaching piece. As far as the benchings or whatever it is, I think guys understand what they do on the court is going to be rewarded. And so, I said at the start of the year, like roles and minutes and those things are not handed out anymore, and guys will compete for those. And when you do the right things, you'll be on the court. And so it wasn't always a case of what some guys didn't do as much as what the others did. And whether it was Aaron hitting 5 threes in a quarter, or I'm gonna probably roll with him in the fourth quarter, or Jeff playing extremely well against Zion and his ex-team Denver, might play him over Jabari. But for the most part, we understand our young guys and our future guys are really gonna hold it down most nights, and they'll be rewarded by that. So expectation coming in was those things will be earned and nothing's determined.
So I understand, like, you know, you don't give away those 5 games, like, easier said than done, of course, then you're in the playoffs or the play-in. But, Coach, if you, from a micro level, like, what do you want to see your guys do that doesn't allow just those 5 games to get away? Like, on a micro level, what needs to happen with some of these kids that they don't allow that? And I know consistency you mentioned before, too.
Yeah, growth in all those areas where, you know, you're going through it for the first time with us. I think we got better throughout the season and just limiting mistakes and improving in all those areas. You know, we got out to a good start, and you saw a big jump from guys. And we, like I said, we kind of plateaued in the middle of the season and finished off stronger. But just the fact that we have a year under our belt, those experiences that they don't have to go through for the first time, understanding what we're requiring of them will be a lot different. And so, you know, we talked about it, although Fred and Dylan and some veterans came in, we still wanted to see our young guys take the step, and that internal growth would probably push us the furthest. And you've seen that throughout the season. You saw Alpy take a big jump early in the season, Jabari as well, and then Jalen kind of caught on later. But just from those consistency standpoints, if those guys take those jumps, and, you know, we're in a different position than we were. So I think this experience, more so than anything, will benefit us and get to hit the ground running next year.
Hey, Mrs. Stone, you talked about, you know, you feel like this team is more well-rounded, but where do you believe, or what are some of the attributes you would like to add on to this team for this upcoming offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I like my team, so I think potentially we're just bringing back everybody that we have, and it doesn't mean we won't look at things, but I don't think we're sitting here today feeling like, oh, we need to go get X at all. I mean, as Ime pointed out, we're very much looking forward to getting Tari back with us. He's an enormous part of what we do. We're ecstatic that we have Steven Adams, and we think he's going to add, you know, a real element to us. So just kind of the guys we have in the locker room today are guys we're excited to bring back. And so, yeah, so we'll look at things, but I think it's not, I don't view our roster as we're missing X, we need to go find it. I think, you know, the job is to try and identify really talented basketball players, and if we find somebody who we think on their own merits is very special and it makes sense, we'd look strongly at that, but it's not, from my perspective, like we have a gaping hole.
Either of you both can answer this. Jalen's late season surge was a real story of the season. I'm curious, did you have any parting words or advice for him before you guys broke for the summer, so to speak?
Yeah, do it earlier, and we're playing right now. And so, no, but you know, like I said, everybody learns and adapts to things on their own speed. And he was a guy that I probably pushed harder than most to improve all around and not just be labeled on one end of the court as a scorer only. You know, you have that athleticism and that competitiveness. You know, do it on the defensive end. You get to anywhere you want on the court, make the right reads, and, you know, not take the contested shots. And so some things that he's done his whole life were being challenged. And so for him, it was just, this is who you are. And although you had your ups and downs, the thing about him I love is, like I said, his resiliency. He played 82 games, played through injury, fatigue, frustration, and never complained about it, never wavered from his work that he put in, and was rewarded with that toward the end of the season. And so, yeah, that's the biggest thing. Like I said, it takes time for everybody, and you see the talent, you see the potential, and to see him fight through that and achieve that late in the season, we're all very proud of him.
Coach, can you talk about where you saw the biggest growth, like from when you got here initially and took over the team, went through the season? Where was the biggest growth, and what is it? Is it anything about the team that surprised you or that you learned along the way?
I would say the growth of overall IQ of the team. You know, that's an area that improved throughout the season and got a lot better toward the end. As I mentioned, limiting the same mistakes from happening over and over, and I think our IQ as a group grew. You got, you know, Fred, Dylan, Jeff, some veterans like that. and a bunch of young guys that are, like I said, being asked to do certain things for the first time. And so the IQ was improved. There was a huge improvement throughout the season. The one thing that not so much surprised me, but was a pleasant surprise, was our competitiveness and effort from day one. And so we were competitive. First day we got on the court with each other to preseason to early season games, and you saw that fight and a little bit of toughness come out as the season went on. So that was a good surprise. Like I said, I'd rather have guys that you have to pull back some than really get them kick-started, and so our group kind of embraced that, and it was a welcome surprise.
Rafael, you have two guys going into year 4, and Jalen and Shingun, that are extension eligible this offseason. Are you open to having those conversations, and how important are those two guys to the long-term puzzle and what you're trying to build?
Yeah, they're both super important to us. To double down on what Ime said, I'm proud of Alperin for he actually had a rough camp, and like you could see like a switch turn from him really early, and so we asked hard things of him too, or Ime asked them pretty bluntly, which and that's great, and I thought he had a really good year. And the thing I said, I actually talked to Jalen, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago. We talked for quite a while. And on-court success is what it is. Like, no one's ever trying to miss shots, right? And so, like, the ball goes in, it doesn't. It's that ends up being really important, so I don't want to say I don't care about that. But in terms of dealing with people as people, the one thing I did tell Jalen was I'm very proud of how tough he was this year, on and off the court, just mentally. And to me, that's what's required to be successful. So just to double down on that comment. Anyway, that's what I got for you.
This is a separate one for each of you. Rafael, I'll start with you. With the announcement of your extension, what does it mean to you to have an opportunity to continue to build on what you started? And then Ime, for you, is a separate one. We talked about the growth of the players, but what about for you personally? How did this year challenge you, and what ways do you feel like you got better, whether it was X's and O's, player development, or whatever it might be?
Very happy to be here. Obviously some news leaked today. We've been in bed together for a while now, and I'm very thankful to Tillman and the Fertitta family. They've been great people to work for and with. Thankful to Ime and his staff. Likewise, it's been a really, really enjoyable year. I do think that we have the chance to build something very special here, and that is very much my goal. I want to build, the absolutely best team that we possibly can, something built for sustainable success, and I think we have a very good chance of that. So I am excited.
And for me, and it's a new challenge with the youngest team that I've coached, for sure. I've mentioned the parallels between here and Boston. We're not as far off as you would think, and so I had that to kind of lean back on. But I learned that I can find joy in some struggle, and keep a good attitude at times. And that's the staff and the players and guys you enjoy being around. So as much as we talked about the start of the season with all the players, ending at 500 might be an accomplishment in people's eyes. It's not going to feel good at the time. Ups and downs, and pretty much winning one, losing one, although we did in a lot of different streaks both ways. And so, for me, it was really how to adjust to a young team that you really have to get their IQ up. Is a lot more teaching than coaching at times. And so when you have the foundation and the IQ and the things I mentioned, I think you can get to the basketball schematics and coaching, but there was a lot of firsts for guys, like I said, that we required of them, but also that some of them had seen in the first place, and so it was good. I think the mix of young guys and veterans and the group in general was a pleasure to work with, and like from a competitive standpoint, we had that from day one. It was just a matter of getting up to speed with everything else, and so as I mentioned, it's not good to be done in April, for the first time, never making the playoffs. And I think what we echoed to the guys, on the last day was, let this be the last time that we're, not playing and not be the norm for you guys. It's at this time of the season, you should be preparing for what's to come and what really matters, and let's achieve that next year.
This is for Mr. Stone. In this upcoming draft, you have another top 10 pick, and of course, you already have several young players that are going to need minutes going forward. How much is that going to factor into whether you keep that pick or maybe trade it to try and improve the team?
Yeah, I mean, it for sure factors in, so we'll definitely take a look. We have to kind of do the evaluation of the whole draft. Kind of one rule of thumb is if you can get a really special player, you get him, because you can't control the timing, and so anytime you can do it, you just do it. The flip side is we're extraordinarily excited about our young guys now, and there's not an obvious source of minutes for anybody coming in. That applies equally well that maybe even more so to a veteran coming in. So I think, we'll just have to look at it in totality and try and figure out what makes the best sense for us, and we'll do it.
Rafael, are Tari and Steven still on track for training camp, and do you have anyone else who might need to have some sort of procedure now?
I hope no, for the last one, not that I'm aware of, and yeah, they're both easily on track.
And you've always talked about wanting to win a championship. That's the goal. The group that you ended the season with, do you feel like that group is good enough to get you there if the young guys develop the way that you hope they will?
I mean, are we including Alperin and Tari?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
The 1 through 12.
Yeah, no, I don't think talent's our problem. I think we have a lot of talent. So, and that's really exciting. That doesn't mean that this current group is one we're going to take for the next 50 years. That would be wonderful, and I would love it if that happened. That tends to not be the case the way the NBA works. But we certainly feel very good about our base of talented players, and all of them at various times have shown glimpses, or more than glimpses, of being guys who could play in big moments in big games and be very successful, and we're excited for it.
This is a question for both of you. Just given the monumental jump in wins from this season, from last season to this season, how do you judge growth going forward if it's not going to be that 20-win jump? Is there other ways?
We're definitely winning 20 more. I think when we sat here last year, you guys asked me, maybe even been you, Kelly, asked me about, can I put a number on the number of games we had to win to see, and I said no. I would say the same thing again. Like, you take each year as it is, the only team that should feel really good at the end of any given year is the team that won the championship. So there's one team out of 30. And the rest of the time, you have to, at the end of each year, make a decision about where you fell short if you're not that team, and what the appropriate steps are to give yourself the best chance of being that team. I think it's that simple, but if you try and put a number on it or something else, I think you're making a mistake.
Coach, a year ago at this time, there were multiple openings. You were very highly thought of around the league. Reflecting back on it, a year ago, making that decision to come here, how justify in your mind that this was the right decision and we're on a path here for something special?
Well, if I went to Phoenix, Milwaukee, or Philly, we'd be in the playoffs now. So,
Well, you wouldn't have me, so.
But no, it was, other than this in Detroit, and I think Toronto immediately opening up right after, these were the ones that were, in front of me at the time, and some I had no interest in, and this was obviously one. People reached out possibly on the other ones, and everything that we talked about, and when I met with Tillman and Patrick, it aligned with what I wanted to do. I think, looking at big picture, being able to build something was more appealing than, jumping into something that has a 2-year window, or so to speak. And so, I knew about the guys. I didn't when I dug into the interview process, but learning more about them, it became more appealing for sure. And, pleasant surprises, things I learned along the way, Houston being a destination to this extent for a lot of guys, and then we knew we had to come in and change the culture. And so as far as that, I think it's gone to plan. We got a ton of young potential, had cap space to go after some free agents, and then, had a chance to just kind of build with the guys we already had. And so, I think it was a no-brainer for me, and very happy with the choice. Tied to this guy for a little longer now, and so not a bad thing as well. But couldn't be more happy, honestly. And grass is not always greener. Looking at the big picture and of some of the other things, and a little instant gratification to keep a playoff streak going, and then you're out of the mix in a few years. Like I said, this is a chance to do something long-term and do something special.
Forgive me if either of you have been asked this or a version of this. Jalen really goes on his hot streak when Alpi is out. I was wondering if that was more out of necessity, and in what ways or why do you feel that those two are a good complement for each other moving forward as you try to keep building and building and building?
One's a guard, one's a center, so that's nice. I think, one of the guys I've worked with for a long time has a saying that says somebody's got to score. So obviously the more shots you get, the more you're going to score. And definitely in that sense, I think Jalen benefited from getting additional shots. And I think Ime has spoken about this a couple of times. He had started playing really good basketball prior to Alperen's injury, and his scoring tailed off a little bit at the end, but he actually played some really good games towards the end of the season where he didn't score particularly well. And so, it's about putting yourself in a position for success, and I think he made some big steps kind of mid-season that set him up that way. And then fundamentally, I think great players can play with great players, and they're not positionally similar. But the challenge that exists for us, I do want to be clear, it's not Jalen and Alperen, it's Jalen and Alperen and Amen and Tari and Jabari and Cam and Dylan and Fred. Like, we're a team, and so everybody's got to figure out how to mesh. Well, Ime's got to figure out how to mesh everyone, but a lot of that's on them and the choices they make. And every team every year faces that challenge. And I actually think even for the teams that are together, and we've had teams that had a lot of similarity year over year, but every year is a fresh challenge, and every year somebody comes back and they added to their game, and how do you incorporate that? Or they want to do more, and how do you incorporate that? So, that's the challenge that's in front of us. And I think it's a good one. I think it's a great one to have all these talented young guys who are year over year getting better and having more potential. But we're cognizant that it is a challenge.
No, I was going to echo that. Obviously, Jalen had more opportunity with Alperen being out, but they're not duplicates as players, and they have contrasting styles and what they bring to the table. And so, early on, we really leaned on Fred, to get us into sets and to kind of initiate everything, and wanted to get our turnovers down and all the things we tried to achieve this year. And Alpi being one of the top low post scorers, Jalen wasn't going to have the same opportunities he's had in the past. And so sometimes it comes down to, making shots, and he was taking the right shots and learning and growing as the season went. And so with the ball in his hands, he goes on a hot streak from a scoring standpoint, and you're going to obviously ride that a little bit longer. And so to Rafael's point, he was really playing good before Alpi went down anyway. And so, looking forward to that combination kind of meshing next year with the more experience and understanding what we're looking for from both of them. And, it's funny, like they said that about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, can they, mesh together? And it's a lot of times it's the guys that every team would want, everybody would want Jalen and Alpi on their team. And I think it's a no-brainer that can work, and we'll see that going forward.
Coach, you come from a background, a family where, it's all about hard work. It's no time to feel sorry for yourself. There were some things said about you, some scrutiny coming in before the Rockets hired you. Do you feel like now, after 1 year, that redemption story for you is not only for you, but for those young men that's in that locker room, and also your son as well?
Yeah, I don't really look at it as, having to prove something from a basketball standpoint. mistakes were made in the past, and was entrusted to come back and lead this team. And so for me, it was getting back to what I love to do, and for the team, it was helping them get on the right path. And so a little bit of both. I mean, you're happy for the achievements that the guys have stepped up and achieved this year, but we still have work to do. And for me, it's not like I'm holding grudges or keeping count of who said what. It's on to the next and kind of put mistakes behind you and move forward. And so, yeah, I mean, that's my mindset on it. And obviously the guys, we wanted to achieve more this year, no doubt, but a lot of them had a lot of success for the first time and played meaningful games. And so you like to see them rewarded for what they've been through and what they've achieved and accomplished this year. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Ime, you mentioned how you spent some of last summer working with the guys before training camp. Do you have similar plans for this summer? Anything set up for that?
Yeah, I mean, we're always, being around the guys, and it seems like a good number will be here, especially the core young guys. But yeah, it's a big emphasis for me and my staff to always go out and see our guys. And it's not like the season's over and everybody goes their separate ways now. You get your time off, and then we are right back at it on how we can improve, and film sessions and so things we'll be sending out. So it's not just 5 months of being away from all the things we established this year. And so I think it's a huge importance to get your hands on your guys throughout the off season and build that repertoire or build that reputation and relationship with those guys to get out and see them. So we might be over in Turkey at some point or everywhere else in between, and our guys will definitely be out, and so I'll catch guys all over the country.
There were obviously a lot of questions about this team coming into the season, like what guys would step up, who would be here, who's a good fit for the team. I'm sure you had your own questions coming in as well. I'm just kind of curious, with one or two questions that were really answered one way or the other for you now that the season's complete.
Yeah, as I mentioned, our competitiveness from day one. When you see 22 games won, you a lot of times would think it's a non-competitive group, and a group that didn't have a fight or just kind of laid down, and that wasn't the case from day one. So you saw young guys that were hungry to improve, and then like the additions that we brought in, I think that benefited us greatly, obviously. And so that was a good surprise. It's like I said, to know that, okay, this is not as far off as a record might say. And so that was a big thing. And then just guys' internal growth in general, like even asking our men to do a lot of different things this year, requiring Jalen, Alpi, and these guys to improve and not just kind of rest on what they've done in the past. And so that was great from day one. Like I said, challenge Alperin to defend and do some different things, and he took a huge jump right from day one. And Jabari being more consistent, like I said, I'm in, and Cam learning to play a little bit different. So it's all across the board. I think the competitiveness initially, and then them receiving our coaching and being receptive to everything we're trying to teach them has been a good surprise.
Rafael, just to follow up on something from earlier, do you view extensions for Alpi and Jalen as a priority for this offseason?
I missed half your question. I apologize. I'll do both. I'll always talk to any player at any time about anything. I'm not we won't engage, but I just, if you want to have a relationship with them, it's based on communication. So we will definitely talk about them. The way the CBA is set up, you can extend, you don't have to, and you can always revisit next summer. So in that sense, there's no gun to our head or anything else. We'll have conversations. We'll see what makes sense for us, what makes sense for them, and then both sides will end up, making whatever decisions we make. So I would say it's an opportunity to have good discussions with them. We look forward to that, but not feeling like it's a burden or a crushing pressure or anything like that.
Do you feel like you can extend all 6 of the first-round picks from the last 3 years? Like, do you feel like, is there...
Yeah, can we keep them on the team?
Yeah.
We do.
We're going to take 3 more. Jonathan?
A couple of guys mentioned the other day that you plan to have the offense be less, maybe basic. What do you have in mind, and how does that fit with the three guys that you know you have who didn't play in the last month or so, Stephen, Alpi, and Tari. But the main question, what do you have in mind with the offense that you didn't get to do this year?
I would say what we did late, we had a lot of success with the pace and, three-point shots and some of the things that Tari and different guys bring offensive rebound naturally. And so we really emphasized those after All-Star break. It was almost like we wanted to kind of lay the foundation and then hone in on some specific things. I think, you look at our group in general to start, and Fred's not the fastest point guard, as far as that, and Dylan's not a natural runner, or Alfie's not a natural runner, and so you don't think that'd be a good lineup as far as like really playing with pace, but it benefits Jalen and Jabari and Cam and Amin and all these other guys, and so you want to have balance, but also do what works well for the team. And so the pace was a thing. Like I said, I'm joking about Fred, but he'll kick the ball up ahead anytime he pushes, whenever he has a chance, and you saw everybody else kind of get on board there. So I think we found something as far as that. It's always a balance when you want to go from 29th in turnovers to top 5 or whatever we ended. It's taking care of the ball and not being careless in transition. So you're zeroing in on specific things, and then you kind of double back onto the transition and the pace and getting the threes up. And so I think we found some things that worked late that even with Alperin out there, we increased it after All-Star break, so it wasn't because he was out only. And so we'll do some of those things better, hit the ground running. I think I kept it pretty vanilla as far as like a lot of the ATOs and draw-ups. You're trying to build this foundation and get our IQ up, and you don't want to get too complicated offensively at times. And so I think you'll see some improvement as far as that and execution of timeouts and different things like that.
Coach, can you talk about the rookies from this year? I mean, a lot of young guys on the team, but just what you saw from Amin and Cam, who of course became a crowd favorite, and was that a surprise? Did you know they had the kind of upside you saw? And obviously they're not done, but just talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a surprise when you take the 4th pick and a guy that was supposed to be top 5. You see that talent, obviously, and it just takes a little bit of time. I mean, Amin had the injury, so the things that we saw him do last 2/3 of the season could have been expedited if he was playing more, because he really took steps as just from opportunity alone. And so, surprise is not the word, but I think we're happy with his growth, doing different things than were required of him, and you put him in the starting lineup with Fred and Jalen. He's not going to handle the ball as much, and he found a ton of different ways to impact the game, and so just adds to his toolkit, going forward, that he can do other things now, but just the ball in his hands. And so that's one. Cam, it took a little time and opportunity as well. You got Dylan, you got Tari, you got Jay Sean, you got these guys in front of him initially, kind of proven themselves, and just like Jalen and other guys were asking him to do more than just one thing on the court. And so he went to Rio Grande, took advantage of that, and came back ready to play when we had some injuries, and not surprising at all based on his talent and competitiveness. He's an aggressive guy that's always going to be in attack mode. It was more so buying into the defensive concepts, and I think he did that and understands how he can impact the game more ways than one. So very happy with those two. Still have a ton of growing to do, and we'll really focus on that this offseason, but happy with their first year.
Coach, just having seen 2 versions of this team, one the more traditional style with Alpi at center, and then the small ball that we saw the last month. Do you have a sense of how to balance that in game going forward? Going to small ball, at times, and going traditional.
Yeah, I think they both work well, and like I mentioned, just because you have guys that are not natural at one thing doesn't mean you can't play with that pace, and vice versa. And so, we want Alfie to improve his shooting and do some of those things, and we're requiring other things of other guys. But I think we had 2 different styles somewhat anyway, and Jeff at the small ball 5 most of the year when Jock was not playing as much. And so we saw both work, and albeit differently at the end of the season with Jabari at the 5. I think they both can complement our team. And so, we got these athletic guys coming in off the bench, but we kind of applied that to the first unit as well. And anytime you have a low post scorer and threat like Alperin, it only adds to the mix, and I think bodes well for us going forward with our versatility, because we got guys we can use in multiple different spots.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.